A few months ago, I started a job in the city, which meant a long commute back to my quiet suburban neighborhood. My usual route was straightforward, but one night, traffic was worse than usual, and I decided to take a detour through a tunnel I'd never used before. It was supposed to save me 10 minutes. I regret that decision to this day. The tunnel wasn't well known, and I only found it after scrolling through my GPS for alternative routes. It looked narrow, old, and less traveled, but it seemed harmless enough. As I drove in, I noticed how quiet it was. There were no other cars, no sounds but the hum of my engine. Halfway through, my GPS glitched. The map froze, and the voice directions cut off mid-sentence. I pulled over to try resetting it. That's when I noticed how eerily still the tunnel was. Even though I was parked in the middle of it, it felt like the space stretched infinitely in both directions. As I fiddled with my phone, I heard a sound, like faint footsteps echoing off the tunnel walls. At first, I thought it was someone walking nearby, maybe a maintenance worker. But when I looked around, I didn't see anyone. The sound didn't stop though. It was steady, growing louder, and it seemed to be coming from behind me. I checked my rearview mirror, but saw nothing unusual. Still, the sound continued, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. I decided to keep driving. When I reached the end of the tunnel, I felt a wave of relief. The air felt lighter, and my GPS started working again. I shrugged the whole thing off as paranoia and went home. But that wasn't the end of it. A few weeks later, I was out late with friends. On the way home, I took a familiar route that included a bridge just a mile from my house. As I approached, my radio cut out, filling the car with static. I hadn't thought about the tunnel since that night, but the sudden silence brought back the same uneasy feeling. Halfway across the bridge, my headlights flickered. I slowed down, gripping the steering wheel tighter, and that's when I saw something on the side of the road. A figure, standing still, right at the edge of the bridge. At first, I thought it was just someone walking, but as I got closer, I realized it wasn't moving. It was just standing there, facing the water, completely still. I slowed down to a crawl, squinting to make out the details. When I passed the figure, my heart nearly stopped. It turned to look at me, and I recognized it. It was the same shadow I'd seen in the tunnel. I didn't stop to question it. I sped off the bridge, my chest pounding. But then, just as I reached the other side, I felt the same oppressive silence I'd felt in the tunnel. The next morning, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I searched online for any information about the tunnel or the bridge. That's when I found an old forum post about both places. They were built around the same time, part of an old road system that had been abandoned after a series of strange accidents. The most chilling part? Several people had reported seeing a figure in the tunnel or on the bridge, always described the same way. Silence, still, and watching. I haven't taken either route since that night. Now, even if traffic is unbearable, I stick to the main roads. I don't know what I saw, but I know I'll never go back to find out. A few months ago, I found myself driving home late after visiting a friend in a nearby city. It was a 2-hour drive, and by the time I left, it was nearing midnight. I wasn't worried. I'd made the trip plenty of times before. But that night, my GPS suggested a new route, a shortcut through a tunnel I'd never seen on the map before. The tunnel looked old and narrow as I approached. The road leading into it wasn't marked, but the GPS insisted it was the fastest way home. I hesitated for a moment, but decided to trust the technology and drove in. As soon as I entered, the world outside seemed to vanish. There were no streetlights, no signs, just the sound of my car's engine echoing against the walls. I couldn't see the end of the tunnel, only darkness ahead. A few minutes in, my GPS started to act up. It froze, then recalculated, then froze again. I figured the signal must have been weak underground, so I just kept driving straight, assuming the tunnel had to lead somewhere. But the longer I drove, the more unsettled I felt. The tunnel seemed endless, and I realized I hadn't seen any other cars since I entered. Then, out of nowhere, I noticed something in my rearview mirror. Headlights. At first, I felt relieved. Another car meant I wasn't alone in this strange place. But the relief quickly turned to unease when the car behind me didn't get closer. The headlights stayed at the same distance, following me steadily, no matter how much I sped up or slowed down. After a few more minutes, I decided to pull over to let the car pass. I eased my car to the side and waited, watching the headlights grow brighter as the car approached. But when it reached me, it didn't pass. It stopped a few yards behind my car. I couldn't see who was driving, but the headlights stayed fixed on my car, glaring into my mirrors. My heart was pounding. I didn't wait to see what would happen next. I hit the gas and sped off, leaving the other car behind. As I drove, I kept checking my mirrors. The headlights were gone, but the feeling that I was being followed didn't leave me. I just wanted to get out of the tunnel, but no matter how far I went, the exit never seemed to come. After what felt like an hour, I finally saw a faint light ahead. It was the tunnel's exit. I pushed my car faster, desperate to get out, but just as I neared the end, my car stalled. I tried restarting it, but the engine wouldn't turn over. Panic set in as the tunnel grew silent around me. Then, in the rearview mirror, I saw them, the headlights. They were back, and this time, they were coming fast. I fumbled with my keys, trying to start the car, but it was useless. The other vehicle was getting closer, its headlights blinding. Just as it seemed like it was about to hit me, the lights vanished. I sat there, shaking, trying to make sense of what had just happened. After a few minutes, my car started again, as if nothing had been wrong. I drove out of the tunnel without looking back. When I got home, I searched online for anything about that tunnel. I found a local news article from years ago about a fatal crash involving a family who had been driving through it. The driver of the other car had been drunk and caused a head-on collision, killing everyone involved. The article mentioned that the tunnel was said to be haunted, with reports of phantom cars appearing and disappearing without a trace. I haven't taken that route since. Even now, I avoid tunnels altogether. Sometimes, when I'm driving late at night, I think about those headlights and wonder, was it just a coincidence? Or was something trying to warn me to stay away? Whatever it was, I'm not risking it again.